like to think of myself as a fairly even-tempered guy. I don't get angry very often in my life. Frustrated, yes. This week has been a lot of frustration, but I don't know that I've gotten full-blown angry just yet. But angry is just something that I don't really like in my life. We all kind of get different anger things, but like you can be frustrated when you're on hold for 27 minutes, even though the robot told you that it was only going to be a 10-minute wait when you first started calling. You can be frustrated after that. But you're likely to blow your lid screaming and cursing after you've been told a 10-minute wait and it stretches on for 2 hours. Well, maybe a little more justifiable to be angry then. But I don't usually get all that angry in my life. My philosophy is typically, that if it's something that's not going to matter in 50 years, why should I get angry about it now? And most of the time, the thing that I'm getting frustrated over is not going to matter in 50 minutes. So what's the point of getting angry about it? But that's not to say that I never get angry. Like everybody else, there are certain things that can make me go from 0 to 100 in 0.2 seconds. Just certain triggers, buttons that can be pressed that immediately go from Brandon's super calm to Brandon's ready to throw hands. Just a couple of different things are that particular things. Things like disrespecting my wife, being condescending towards my children, belittling the work that I do, or trying to tell me that Super Bowl 57 was officiated properly and the Chiefs deserve to beat the 49ers. Eventually I'll get over that. But when I do reach that point, there's usually one of two reactions that I have. The first is I just remove myself from the situation. I walk away from it entirely before I do or say something that I'm going to regret. Most of the time that one wins out. But the second reaction is I have to break something. I haven't used that second one in quite a while. And in fact, I was trying to think about it this week, and the last time I can genuinely remember getting so angry to the point that I felt I needed to break something was even before the girls were born. It was during my second ministry, and I think I've shared with you that was a very tumultuous time in my life anyway. It was I was dealing with a particularly rough patch there. Little did I know that rough patch was going to be the entire time I was at that church. But I had once again gotten another phone call from another elder telling me that the thing I did was wrong, or the thing that I didn't do, I was wrong for not doing it, or that I was just plain old wrong. Never mind the fact they never offered me any sort of direction. Like, if you're going to tell me I'm wrong, that's fine, but point me as to what I could do to get back on the right path. Like, I'm open to that. But this was just, you're wrong. Period. And I had had enough. And so I had the wherewithal at least to ask Mandy, get me something you're not going to miss. And she brought me a couple of these, I don't know, they were like little ice cream bowls. Little ceramic ice cream bowls that we had, I think we got as a wedding present and never used because this is not the appropriate size for ice cream. Good. So I took them down to our basement of the house that we were living in at the time. It was an unfinished basement. And I smashed them up against the stone walls that were there. Very cathartic. And then I calmed down. And I made a realization when I calmed down in that particular moment, and that realization was, now I have a mess to clean. And so instead of feeling better about my situation, I just found myself feeling dumb. And I think that happens a lot whenever we express anger to a point of needing to do something with that anger. Most of the time, whenever we express our anger in whatever capacity that takes for you, we just kind of feel dumb when everything is over. I don't think any one of us have ever had a moment of anger that has elicited a response of ours of some kind, and then later thought, boy, I'm glad I did that. I look so cool. I don't think any of us have ever had that experience in our life. Usually, for most of us, we'll look back at the thing that we did in that particular moment of anger, and we'll find ourselves asking, why did you do that? That was dumb. right? We are asking that of ourselves more often than not. And anger has a way of destroying our rationality and can make even the most respected and even revered people look foolish for the way that they reacted in their anger. A lot of times, once we've calmed down, we've come back to our senses, we have to start the apology tour of going and apologizing to everyone who saw us act like a fool in that moment. We are never our best selves when anger wins out in our lives. No one is ever their best selves when anger wins out. Sometimes that anger can come out in a flash. We can have those things that just trigger anger immediately, but more often than not, at least in my life, I'm guessing in probably most of yours as well, that anger is something that just builds and builds over time. One frustration bleeds into another frustration, which bleeds into another one, and before you know it, you're erupting on somebody who had nothing to do with the initial instigating incident, or maybe had nothing to do with any of the incidents at all. Right? Like there's a reason I have a rule of my own, and that's don't call Dad during planting or harvest season. Something broke, or a lot of things have broken, and he's angry. So he's gotten better over time, I'll say that. He's gotten much better at being able to focus that, but sometimes that happens, and unfortunately that's a characteristic that I have as well, that I have to try to keep in check. The frustrations continue on, usually brought on by an outside force, and when we finally let it go, we act in a way that, at least on the surface, is uncharacteristic of us. More often than not, it kind of reveals a characteristic that maybe even be a surprise to us, and we're left to wonder, who was that, even when it was ourselves? Usually when anger wins out, most of us wind up doing things that we wish we could take back. Or we'd say things that we wish we could take back. Because it might not be just a broken ceramic that stands as testimony of your anger. It might be broken relationships. Sometimes the thing we break in our anger is another person. Sometimes the thing we break in our anger is ourselves. And when something is broken in anger, it's rarely something that can be truly repaired. And I would think that Moses would probably understand this better than anybody else. See, we have a tendency when it comes to people like Moses, people who are not only in the Bible itself, but take up large quantities of Scripture, and we kind of think that they're there because they must have been such a great person, that they've done all these great things. But if you recall back in our Jacob series, we said that dude was a scumbag, and he still made the book. And while Moses was nowhere near the level of Jacob, he still had his moments of making foolish choices or doing things that he would later come to regret. In fact, there are 3 times that we have in Moses' story that we get from Exodus all the way to Deuteronomy, 3 different instances of Moses' anger resulting in something being broken that cannot be put back together again. The first is actually pretty early on in his story. It's all the way back whenever he sees the Egyptian slave master beating an Israelite. And in his anger in that moment, Moses does, frankly, a rather irrational thing and kills the Egyptian. The end result of this is that Moses then has to flee as a fugitive, to leave his family, to leave the home that he has known his entire life, to leave the people that he cares about for 40 years. Abandoning the life that he once had because he did something in a moment of anger that he couldn't take back. The second one we actually saw just a couple of weeks ago. It's when Moses came down from the mountain and saw the people worshiping the golden calf. We always forget that Moses is carrying something in that moment, something pretty important. Moses is actually carrying with him 2 stone tablets that have the 10 Commandments written on them, but it's not like that's not necessarily what makes these special. These particular tablets were hand-carved by God himself. It is one of the only times in all of Scripture that God ever gives something to a human being himself, physical, tangible evidence of God's existence among the people. And when Moses sees them worshiping a false god, in his anger, he throws it down and they shatter. I think we kind of lose sight of just how significant these things would be, how precious these things would be. I mean, these are handcrafted by God himself. When Moses goes back, God tells him, well, you get to make the next ones. God had made these all by himself, given them to Moses to give to the people as a sign of their God's love for them. And in a moment of anger, Moses destroyed it. The third, and possibly the most costly, is found in our text today. We're going to find ourselves in Numbers chapter 20, so please turn there in your Bibles or on your apps. But as you get there, I want to do a little bit of backtracking. Because I don't think that the moment that we're going to read today is a moment that just happened. I don't think it's a moment where just, boom, Moses is mad. I believe this has been building for years. Because when we see what happens, what takes place before this moment of anger for Moses, boy, it sounds awfully familiar. As you may know, Moses started off as a very reluctant leader. He was not prone to want to be the leader of the Israelites. He didn't want to go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. He just kind of wanted to be by himself. He had that moment in Egypt. He had ran away, and now here he is standing in front of a burning bush with the voice of God saying, go. But when he finally does go, after trying to come up with a bunch of reasons as to why he shouldn't be, he finally does agree to go. But not long after the Israelites are released from Egypt and they face their first real opposition of any kind whatsoever in the form of the Egyptian army coming after them, they immediately want to go back. Exodus 14, verses 11 and 12 is maybe one of the most overly dramatic lines of all time, and I love it so much because of that. It says, they said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? You know that was a teenage girl, right? Sorry, but I have teenage girls. Pretty confident that was one of them. Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. First moment of opposition. We should just go back. But not long after that, when they run out of food, the people respond by saying in Exodus 16, verse 3, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. I think I've been that hungry before. When they didn't have water in Exodus chapter 17, verse 3, they said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Then we get the whole golden calf thing where they're turning against God. Then they eventually get tired of eating manna and they want meat. They want something other than this delicious bread that God gives them every morning with absolutely no effort on their part. And they say in Numbers 11, verses 5 and 6, we remember the fish that we ate in Egypt that cost us nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic, but now our strength is dried up and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. And then, of course, there's last week, where they said in Numbers 14, 3 and 4, why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Every single time that this group of people face any kind of an inconvenience, their first reaction is that they want to go back to the land of Egypt. One minor inconvenience, and the first thing they say is, boy, life was better when we were slaves. And while, Moses points out to them on multiple occasions that you're not really complaining to me, you're complaining to God, Moses is still the physical leader of this people. And so that means that he has to hear all of this whining, all of this complaining. And I don't know about you, but I reach a point in my own life where if I hear enough complaining, you just want to on the forehead, right? It's got to be wearing on him by this particular point. I mean, Moses has been spending years now with these people. He has seen them constantly make fools of themselves, claiming that they want to go back into slavery. And when Moses, again, has to correct them, it's going to eventually start to weigh on the guy. It's going to keep building up to him, and especially after last week, that one actually cost them being able to enter into the promised land of God. The one that made a 2-year journey into now a 40-year journey. These people have been waiting literally their entire existence to be able to go into the promised land. They get right to the border. They complain one more time about Egypt, and God says, well, I've had enough now. And tells them they have to wait for an entire generation. They're going to wander into the wilderness. And so I have to imagine that Moses is more than just a little frustrated at these people. Because Moses himself wants to get into that promised land. He wants to go into there. He wants to go and establish his own life there. And yet again and again and again, these people choose to rebel and argue against God. In fact, a couple of chapters before we actually get to our text today, they actually tried to rise up against Moses. You ought to really read the story of how they got out. Like, realistically, I probably could have done a whole year in Exodus and this whole narrative, but like the ground opens and swallows up the people leading that rebellion. Like, that's cool. I got a couple of people in my own life I wouldn't mind seeing that happen too. Don't worry, Zane, you're not one of them yet. So, but he sees all this stuff happening over and over and over again, and all the time these Israelites are choosing complaining and rebelling against what God has for them, and it has to be weighing on Moses. Because Moses is sort of the in-between guy. He is the middleman here. Right? You ever been in a restaurant and you're upset that your food is taking forever to get out to you? Do you go back in the kitchen and yell at the people whose fault it really is? Nobody ever does. Instead, they get mad at the waitress, who's just the go-between between the table and the kitchen. It's not her fault or his fault. None of this is Moses' fault. Moses is the go-between between the people of Israel and God himself, and so it's got to be weighing on him. But there's another small moment that happens at the start of our text today in Numbers 20, something that on the surface we might read and we might move on from, but I think it's here for a reason. I think that it is placed just before this particular moment for a purpose, and it might be a contributing factor into what happens next, because it says in verse 1, "And the people of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there." Miriam is a unique character in the story of Moses. She's Moses' older sister. And if you recall from your Sunday school days, because again we glossed over Moses' origin story, when baby Moses is placed into a basket and put into the Nile, there is one family member that goes to track the progress of the basket: Miriam. And when the basket eventually finds its way to Pharaoh's daughter, and Pharaoh's daughter gets the baby out and decides that she wants to keep it, there's one young lady who asks, "Would you like me to go and get you a nursemaid?" Miriam, who goes and gets her mother to take care of her baby brother who is now in the house of Pharaoh. Miriam plays a very unique role in Moses' life. And so while we don't get a whole lot of reading about interactions between Moses and Miriam as he grows up, we still have to imagine Big Sis plays a big part of Moses' life. And now she's gone. And Moses is having to process the grief of losing a beloved sister. But he's not exactly granted a whole lot of time from the people themselves. Because no sooner do we learn that Miriam died than in verse 2, it tells us, now there was no water for the congregation. Oh boy. And they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron. You gotta be kidding me. We're doing this again. Isn't it interesting that the Israelites seem to fall into this pattern over and over and over and over and over again, and they can't seem to break out of it? Something goes moderately wrong, the first thing they do is whine and rebel. Sounds a little like us if we're honest, though. And sure enough, as part of their grumbling, they got to play their favorite card, right? We got to work it in here somewhere. It's got to be played. Verse 5, it says, "And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is no place for grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Now, here's the thing. When my kids were little, and they would hear something that they found funny, their go-to reaction was to repeat that particular funny thing over and over and over and over. And they would laugh, and to Dad, it got a little less funny every time they said it. And so we had to tell them at a certain point in time, like, hey, the more that you repeat something, the less meaning it has to it. Right? The more you keep saying things over and over again, the less anybody's going to care about what you have to say. We passed that place, 6 weeks ago with these people. And yet here they are again. Another inconvenience has hit them. And once more they're saying, boy, I wish we were back in Egypt. Egypt was awesome. We loved Egypt the entire time we were there. All 430 years was great. It's amazing how we can rewrite history. Because again, they're saying we want to go back to getting beaten every day if we don't bring up the bricks the right way. We want to complain even more and say that we're better off in Egypt. We are long past the time when the Israelites should be doing this, and yet again they're playing the we were better off in Egypt card. But they have no water. Again. They're thinking that they and their livestock might die. Again. And they're blaming Moses for all their problems. Again. And so once more, Moses goes to God and asks what he should do about these people. Now, when he says, what should I do about these people, I kind of read that particular line as, what do you want me to do about these people? Right? Like, there have been a couple of times where God has said, hey, I'm just going to wipe them out and start over with you, Moses. And so I can't help but wonder if Moses isn't saying, what do you want to do about these people? Anything? But God tells Moses to do something vaguely similar to what he had done in the past, but with a small change this time. And it says in verse 8, take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and Aaron your brother, and tell the rock before your eyes to yield its water. So you shall bring water out of the rock for them and give drink to the congregation and their cattle. Last time it was hit the rock, right? Take your staff, batter up. This time it is speak to the rock. And real quick, time out. How cool would that be if you could just walk up to a rock sometime and just go, hey, can you give me like some lemonade? That'd be awesome. No, he tells Moses to go and speak to the rock. And I think that God did this intentionally. I think he did this knowing what Moses is going through and trying to get Moses to react in a manner that would be just a little bit calmer than what Moses would like. But let's, again, think about everything that Moses has been through. He didn't want to be the leader in the first place. God told him you have to be. And so all he's done ever since that moment of leaving the burning bush is listen to these people whine and complain. Over and over and over again, saying that they were better off as slaves in Egypt. And yet every single time that they whine and complain, God has done something miraculous amongst these people. And they even tried to set up a fake God, regardless as to all the signs that they got to see of him. And eventually it got to the point where they're whining and they're complaining and their desire to go back to Egypt cost them the promised land. They waited 500 years to be able to go in the promised land, and because they couldn't stop their whining, they have to wait 4 more decades. And now Moses' sister is dead. She's never going to get to see the promised land. And these people are back at it again. I just buried my sister. And they're coming at me again with this whole, we're better as slaves, garbage. Moses is looking for a release. Because that frustration has been building now for years. And it has pivoted to stop being frustration and to be full-blown anger. And so as Moses goes to that rock again, God may have wanted him to speak to the rock. Moses needs that release. So in verse 11 it says, and Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice. And water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank and their livestock. Whew. Right? Oh man, I needed that. I just needed to hit something so bad. I know you felt that way. As a teenager, I had to patch up a hole in the wall because I felt that way once. Just needed to hit something. Sometimes you just need that, don't you? You just need to smash something. So Moses hit it not once, but twice. Boy, you could just feel all of that anger. Just leave his body. Small problem, though. God told Moses to speak to the rock, not hit the rock. So while it might have made Moses feel a little bit better in the moment that he got to hit and break something, it's going to come at a price. One that is pretty steep. Verse 12 says, and the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me, to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. Because of a moment of anger, one single, let's be honest, stupid moment of anger, Moses is not going to enter the promised land. Moses' anger, built on this frustration, is now going to cost him the promised land. The one who stayed true to God out of the lot of them, including Aaron itself, the one who did everything he could to obey God and what God wanted, had one single moment of disobedience. And now he has lost everything. That has to sting. I thought I was dumb for breaking a little ceramic ice cream dish. Moses broke his future. This entire time, Moses, who had been the one beating the proverbial drum to the people, that they needed to stay loyal to God, that they needed to stick with the path, that they needed to trust God, had one moment of disobedience to God. And now he's not going to get to lead them into the promised land. Unchecked anger can be such a destructive element in our lives. Unchecked anger can destroy so much. It can taint everything that we have built in our lives. Again, Moses was meant to lead the people into the promised land. That's not hyperbole. That's literally the purpose God had for him. God's entire design was that Moses would be the one to lead the people of Israel into the promised land, to help them establish a nation of their own for the first time in their history. That he was going to be the guy who led them into, he was supposed to be at the walls of Jericho. He was supposed to be the one who's giving the people all the military advice that they need. He's the one who's supposed to stand up to the people of an event that we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks and say, choose this day whom you will serve, but for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. That was supposed to be Moses. But one moment of his anger getting the better of him, of his anger ruling out in that particular moment, cost him everything. It changed the course of his life entirely. And whether we want to admit it or not, our own moments of anger and frustration can have disastrous effects on the relationships in our lives. Our own moments of anger and frustration can create entirely new relationships by destroying the old ones. Anger born out of frustration, misdirected anger, period, can ruin relationships, friendships, even marriages. It can destroy so much of what we have tried to build up in our lives. And it all changes the moment that anger explodes. Because anger is like a bomb. Once it is set off, it's going to hurt people that we never expected it to hurt, never intended it to hurt. Unchecked anger is such a dangerous thing for us, because of what it can take away from us. Now, I want to pause for a second because I want to make sure that you hear me clearly. I'm not saying that anger itself as the emotion is wrong. Anger is a perfectly natural human emotion every human being has experienced in their lives. Where it becomes sinful behavior is what we do in our anger. Moses getting angry and frustrated at the people for again claiming we want to go back to Egypt was not sinful. What was sinful is that God told him to speak to the rock. Moses instead hid it. So Moses did something that God told him not to do. That is the definitive baseline, that's sin, right? God says do one thing, we make a different choice, sin. Correct? We can all agree on that theological principle, right? Okay. Had Moses chosen to still do what God told him to do, even though he was angry, and found a different release for his anger, everything would have worked out just fine. It would have worked out just fine for him. So the thing of it is that anger is a normal, I'll even go so far as to say healthy human emotion to feel. It's what we do with it. It's what we choose to do. And believe me, I know sometimes it doesn't feel like a choice. It's still a choice. It's what we choose to do in our anger that makes all the difference in the world. Some people will see injustice in the world taking place against other people, and in their anger, it will lead them to seek to bring change to those scenarios. It'll get them just angry enough that they'll want to do something positive with that feeling. But when our anger causes us to lash out irrationally, ways that tear down ourselves and those around us, that's when it's problematic. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 26 and 27, Paul actually would write, "Be angry and do not sin." He would also say, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger and give no opportunity to the devil." In those verses, we can see that it's perfectly all right for us to be angry. That's fine. Anger is okay, but be mindful of the actions that you take in your anger. See that they are not things that go against God and against His will for your life. And then I love this part too, and be quick to let it go. Because the longer you hold on to anger, the more opportunities you have for sinful behavior. You ever met somebody in your life who's just constantly angry? Are they a fun person to be around? Do they say nice things to everybody in their lives? It's because they've never learned to let that anger go. There is a freedom that takes place when we do that. And so the question that we always tend to ask in moments like these is how? How do I handle my anger in a way that allows for a cathartic release without doing something that goes against the will of God? How do I make that happen? How do I let go of anger? And there's a couple of things that I'm going to give you today, a couple healthy tips. These help me out too, because again, I get angry just like everybody else. Mandy's heard me yell at the TV a lot to a bunch of 20 and 30-year-old millionaires who don't care about me or what I'm doing. And yet I talk to them like they're idiots. But one thing to do is simply take deep breaths as you feel anger rising. That sounds a little cheesy and corny, I know. But here's the thing. When you take those deep breaths, and I recommend going in through your nose, out through your mouth, when you do that, you're forcing your brain to pause. You're taking that moment where you're escalating in your emotion, and you're forcing your brain to go, hold on a second. Right? And give yourself an opportunity to really think about what it is that you're getting angry about. Right? And oftentimes you're going to find out that the thing that you're getting angry about, kind of dumb. Right? Yes? No? Just me? Okay. So I'm the one who only gets angry at dumb stuff. Cool. Just allowing yourself to take some deep breaths gives you a moment to pause and ask yourself a simple question: is this really worth the emotion that I'm giving it? And you're going to find that 99% of the time the answer to that question is no, it's not. Because I'm probably not going to be angry about this in 10 minutes. Right? Guy cuts you off in traffic. Right? Are you going to go follow that guy now for the next several hours so you can go give him a piece of your mind? No. Just give yourself a deep breath. Go, that guy was kind of dumb. And move on with your day. Holding on to that is not going to do you any favors. So start by taking some deep breaths. Allow your brain a chance to pause. The second one, if the anger doesn't slow down in the midst of that pause, there is nothing wrong with just walking away for a little bit. Right? If you feel the anger begin to grow within you, and taking deep breaths didn't stop it, you can take a time out and remove yourself from that scenario. And I'm not just saying like, hey, let's change the subject. I'm not saying, hey, can we talk about something else? I'm saying physically remove yourself. Get out of that situation. Allow yourself a chance to breathe, to calm down, to get in that right place. Because once you've allowed yourself to get to the anger point, you're going to do something destructive more often than not. So removing yourself from the situation entirely allows you to ask yourself some really good questions. Like, what is going on right now? Why is this making me so angry? What is this touching on that I'm not seeing in my own life? Right? Anger takes away rationality entirely. And so we cannot make rational choices when we're angry. Why do you think the world is currently in the situation that it's in? People are constantly angry, and so they're not thinking rationally. If we would step away and pause and reflect for a moment, we could maybe have a chance to calm down, and who knows, rationality might win out one day. Maybe I'm naive, but that's what I'm hopeful for. What would happen if at the next congressional hearing they all just, like when it started getting escalating in tension, somebody said, hey guys, let's take 10. Let's all calm down. Let's come back and talk about this like grown-ups. Boy, wouldn't that be great? I would vote for that politician every time they were back on the ballot. Because they're the ones with the level head in this scenario. Getting yourself a chance to get away is going to allow yourself to think about things and not allow things to escalate to the point that something terrible is going to happen. And lastly, and this could be this could be a little corny for a pastor to say this, pray. Pause and pray. Give yourself a moment to check in with God. Ask God what's going on in this scenario. Walk away from the situation, cool down, and pray. Be mindful of your actions. Think before you speak. It's not easy to do that. It's not easy to pray when you're angry. In fact, pastor and author Jim Kabbalah, and I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, so if he ever sees this, sorry, Jim, he actually said, angry people don't pray. Angry people don't pray. I think there's a lot of truth in that. So quickly praying over the situation, it allows the Holy Spirit to guide your thoughts and your actions. And find out if you can't stop getting angry, what's something positive that you can do with what you're angry about, rather than be destructive, rather than do something sinful that you're going to wind up regretting later. So simply pause, step back, and pray can be the difference between controlling our anger and allowing our anger to control us. Those three things alone can help de-escalate a situation that maybe is only a problem for us in that scenario. But here's the thing, Moses' unchecked anger cost him the promised land. The thing that he had invested years of his life in leading the people towards, one moment of unchecked anger took that away from him. What is your unchecked anger costing you? If it can cost Moses the promised land, what can unchecked anger cost you? James said in James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, and we'll close with it. Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God.